Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me in this video tutorial where we are going to make a very simple game using the Stride3D game engine. So I'll just start the game, and as you can see, this is a RPG top-down view pixel art type of game. It's a very simple game. Okay, there's a ghost hunter that goes around and he can shoot at some ghosts. You can shoot at some ghosts, and there's some walls there's collisions going on, and there's some spawn points where the ghosts are spawning from. And of course, if you get caught, then it's the end of the game. So very simple, very basic stuff, just to show you how the Stride game engine works. And of course, there's a lot of things that I could have done here, but to be honest, this is my first game using Stride3D. I'm not a game developer. I'm a software developer, not a game developer. But I wanted to make a game, and since I'm proficient using C Sharp, so I found out about Stride3D and decided to make a very simple game using Stride3D. Just some heads up before we go. So you should know a little bit about C Sharp. I strongly recommend that you go and check out all the Stride3D tutorials in the Stride3D webpage, and also check out the manual. Read through the manual, check out all the code examples that they have there. Maybe if you want, you can do that before you start doing this tutorial. Anyways, this code is going to be on GitHub. I'll put the link below, and you can use it as you want. You can use all the resource that is there, and please, if you want to use it as a template for your own games, go ahead. And also, I'm sorry about my English is not the best, but sometimes explanations don't come easy to me, so just bear with me along. So let's start our little game. To create our wonderful game, we're going to need obviously the Stride engine. You can navigate to the page stride3d.net and download it in its current version, which is 4.1. Just press the download button over here and download that and install it on your machine. Next, we'll also be needing Visual Studio. You can download the Visual Studio Community Edition, which is free, and install it also on your machine. Once you're done, we'll go on to the next phase. Before we get to start working on our game, we're going to need some resources. These resources are some images that we are going to need to build our world in the game, also to animate our main character and some enemies. We're also going to need some sounds to show you how the sounds are working in the Stride3D. Once you can download these resources in the link below, I'll leave for you. Just download it and put it on your machine in some place that you can find easily, and then we'll pull them to the Stride Game Studio to work on them. Once you have Stride3D installed on your machine, you can launch it by clicking the icon, and then a Stride Launcher window will appear. And there's some important things to notice here. First of all, if you have already installed Visual Studio, you will need to install the Visual Studio extension, and just press the button below for the correct version that you have installed of Visual Studio. And once you have this installed, you are ready to start your game project. For creating a new project, we go to this big start button on the top here, and you press it, and now the project selection window appears. Inside here, some things to notice is that you have a lot of options. These are templates that you can definitely have a look because they have examples of how to do certain things and create some things on your games. So these can serve as great examples to learn. But for us, for our great game, we're just going to need the closest thing to an empty project. So if you press here on new game, you'll see that we have this example. So a very basic uh, game example with the skybox. There's a ball in the center here, and also the ground. And we'll select this one. Uh, don't forget to name your project. So we're going to give it a name. So RPG game, and that's okay. So select that. We get another window asking us what platforms do we want to run our game in, and just leave it Windows, leave everything as it is, and okay. And the Stride Game Studio is launching. You can see in the center here that everything is loading, so it's kind of flashing around, and we have it loaded. So now we can have a look here. You can scroll up and down, and you can press the middle mouse button to look around. If you press Alt and the left mouse button, you can plan it in a more open way. And as you can see, this is what we get with this template. But this is not what we're going to need to create our magnificent game. So we're going to delete most of this. So we're not going to need the directional light. So we can delete that one. Skybox as well, delete that one. Ground, delete it, and the ball goes away. And also here you have the asset view, and we will also delete these because we're not going to use these, so we can delete those as well. Delete that one. Here, material, clear our that one. References, yeah, and delete that one, and delete that one, and just leave the main scene, the camera, the graphics composer, that's okay. Game settings, yep, that's necessary there, and save it. And that's it. So basic camera controller, let's check what's going on here. So if you click twice, you open the scripts window, but we are actually not going to use this one, so delete that one as well. Click on the camera, and let's have a look what we have here on the right side. So this is the property grid on the right side here, and everything that you have on your main view, on your main scene, sorry, is going to be inside this tree. So the main scene contains all the things that your game will have. In this case, we have the camera here. So basic camera controller was the script that we just deleted, so we are going to delete this one as well. So just press there and leave camera with this basic stuff here, and that's it. So next we are going to need to get our resources, the images that we have downloaded previously, and put them in a resource folder inside our game project. So on the root here on the solution explorer, you press on the right mouse button and show in explorer. This will take you to the root of our game. So you click on RPG game to open this folder, and you'll see you have a resources folder. Open that folder. Inside you have the skybox resource. We can delete this one because we've already deleted the assets that reference this skybox. Let's get our resources inside here. I'll just copy everything inside here, and that's it. And now that we have it inside our project, we can start creating our assets to then use on our game. Let's now position our camera in a certain way that we'll need it to be in order to view the game. Since this is an RPG top-down view game, we'll need the camera to be more or less in the center and facing the background where all the game elements will play out. So to do that, just press the camera, and on the right side you'll see the property grid with the camera properties. And here we are going to make some changes here on the position of the camera. So in the position in the x-axis we'll put 0 here, and on the y-axis we'll also put 0, and in the z-axis we'll put 50. So as you can see, our camera is now gone from the view. If we scroll back, you should be able to see it somewhere. I'll just pan it around. Once you get close to your camera, so you'll see these lines spreading out. This is the camera view, but this is not correct still. And also we need to, the rotation we need to put here 0 as well on the property grid. And the scale, we can leave it as it is. Okay, you see that some changes were made. And let's change the projection as well. We want it to be orthographic, and you can see there's some changes going on here. And you can see here that this kind of makes like a rectangular shape going to infinity, and inside this rectangular shape, so if we move it on the side, you'll see that this is kind of a rectangular box that goes into infinity, and everything that goes in the middle is going to be what's going to be seen on our game. So the background will need to be put inside this box. Still, we will need to make some changes to this. Orthographic size will be 6. The far clip plane will be 80 to reduce our field of view, and you can leave the rest as it is. Now that we have our camera set up, we are going to get our texture background, which is the image that we have on our resources. So to do that, just click on the assets folder here on the solution explorer, and then on the asset view we are going to click on add asset, go to texture, and go to color. This will create our asset as a texture, so click on there, and you can see we get our Stride project, so RPG game, and the resources folder where we put everything. We will select the background, and we have it on our asset view ready to use in our project. Next, we'll be needing an entity that will represent our background texture inside the game. So to create an entity in Stride3D, we just go here to the main scene, and inside here click on the right side right mouse button and select empty entity. We'll give it a name of background. Sorry about that. And right away you'll see that something appears on our game, and we'll change the position of this background element. So here on the, when we select the background, on the right side on the property grid, we'll make some changes here. So the z-axis we'll put 0.9 and leave everything else here. That's okay. So at the moment, if we run our game, we won't see anything because the empty entity is not referencing our background texture yet. So as you can see, there's nothing yet, just a gray window. Now we are ready to reference our texture, our background texture that we created previously. So for that, we are going to go to the with the background selected, sorry, we are going to go to the property grid, add a component, and here we are going to select sprites and then select sprite, and we get this, but we have a new selection field here. This is a sprite component of this background entity, and we are going to reference the texture. To reference the texture is really easy. We just click on our background texture and just drag it in here to our source, and we already see it appear on the main scene. For all these properties here, we won't be changing anything, so we can leave this as it is. And now if we run our project, let's see what we get. So now we can see the background appear. Let's now add our main character, our ghost hunter, to the game. So it's going to be positioned on the center, just in front of the background, so we can see it well. So to do this, we are going to more or less do the same steps that we did for the background. So add an asset, and we are going to add 2D sprites. And we are going to select our Ghost Hunter sprite sheet. Like that. And you can see it appear right away on our asset view. And now, if you click twice on this image, we will go to the sprite sheet properties. And here we have to do some work, because if you click on the sprites, you see that everything appears here, and this is only one sprite, so one represents only one frame and it's taking the whole image, and that's not what we want. For this animation, we will have to create individual sprites or frames for each image here. So to do that, we are going to select this magic wand tool, and we are going to click on the first image that we see. And here, since this is just standing still, so we can put this and give it a name of idle. Next, we are going to the next frame, and we collect the duplicate selections, right? Selected sprites. So we click there, and we get another frame, and for this frame we'll select the next image here of the character, and we'll give it a name of walk down. Okay, this is the first frame of the walking down sequence. So are these 4 images here, and we duplicate, select the next one, duplicate, select the next one, duplicate, and select the next one, and we have our 4 walking down frames. Next, we duplicate again, but we will change the name here, and we will change it to walk right. And we'll do the same process again. So select the image, the first image of walking right sequence, duplicate, select the next, duplicate, select the next, duplicate, and select next. And you do this for the remaining sequences here. For the last one, we'll add the sprite for the small ball in the top here, which will be the projectile. Change there and select the ball. Now that we have our sprite sheet ready for our character, we can add it to our main view. Next, we are going to be adding our main character to the game world, and to do that we're going to need, as always, an entity to represent our game character. So add an empty entity to the main scene, give it a name, Ghost Hunter, and on the right side on the property grid we are going to add a new component for this entity that is going to reference the sprite sheet that we created. And actually, let's change the name and give it a nicer name. So maybe Ghost Hunter sprite sheet. We are going to again select our Ghost Hunter entity, and we are going to add a component. This time we are going to add a sprite component. So sprites, and we will reference the Ghost Hunter sprite sheet just like we did with the background. We just drag it and reference it into a sprite component. And now we are going to edit the transform section here, and we are going to change the scale of our character to, in the x-axis is going to be 1.1, and in the y-axis is going to be 1.2, and the position is going to be 1 in the z-axis, so it can put our character in front of the background, because the background, as you remember, is 0.9, so it's behind the character, and everything will be put in front of the background. So our Ghost Hunter is in the z-axis, the 1 position here. So next we're going to leave everything as it is. Let's run the game now and see what we get. You can see that the character now appears in the center, but there's nothing we can do with it. We can't control the character at the moment. So that's what we are going to be doing next. We are going to be adding a script with some code to control the character. So a new solution explorer, click the code folder, and we are going to add a script. So script, sync script, and we'll give it a name. It can be Ghost Hunter controls, and we click twice and the window appears with the Ghost Hunter controls, the sync scripts, and here we can see some indication of what we can do. So declare public or private fields. The public fields will be available in the editor for you to manipulate, while the private fields will only be accessible inside the script here. So we have our start method where you can initialize any private or public fields that you have, and also the update method that updates your code every frame that passes. Let's add the code to our script. For that, we are not going to be adding inside the Stride Game Studio, but instead we are going to be adding it in Visual Studio Community. To open Visual Studio Community, just press the button up here, select Visual Studio Community, and it should open right away. If it does not open on the script, just navigate to the script, click, and you should see the code here as you can see it on the Stride Game Studio. So let's add a couple of things that we need. First of all, we need a variable to control the speed of the player. So that is then here where you declare the public member fields, public or private member fields. And we are going now to add the delta time variable. The delta time variable is what is used to even out the time between frames, so the movement of the player does not seem odd. So let's do that now. Now we are ready to add a private method that will handle the movement of the player. And we'll pass in the delta time. We will now generate the method. Let's now add the logic to control our Ghost Hunter. When we press the keys W, S, D or A to move either up, down, left or right. So let's do this now. We can also check if there is a keyboard present. And now all we need to do is reference this script in our entity, because when the script is referenced in the entity, you will have access to all the properties of that entity. Here in this case we are using the position and calculating where it's going to be when you press the certain buttons to move up, down, left or right. So let's do that and then test our game. Back in the Stride Game Studio, we are now going to the main scene, click on our Ghost Hunter, then on the right side on the property grid, we are going to add a new component that is going to be the script that we just created. So select script, then the script should appear right away here. So select that, and the script is now added to our entity. And now let's test the game. So now if we press the W key, the player goes up. We press the S key, the character goes down. The D key goes right and the A key goes left. But there's a problem, because if we move all the way to the right or all the way up or down, then the character goes out of screen. So it would be nice if the camera could follow the character around. So let's do that next. Let's now make the camera follow our character around. So for that we are going to be adding a script. It will be a sync script, just like we did before. Let's give it a name. So let's call it camera behavior. We have our script now, and let's open it right here in Stride Game Studio. Okay, so now we won't be needing the start script this time. so we can remove that. We will be referencing by code our entity, the entity to follow, that will be our character. And also we'll declare another private field with the follow speed. So one thing to note is that the public field will be available in the Stride Game Studio in the property grid. Then we can reference it through this way. And next I'm going to be adding the code that is responsible for making the camera follow our player around, our character around. So again, we are here using the delta time. We are getting the current position from the camera entity, and we get the position from the entity to follow. That will be our character. And also here we are using a special method called blurb that makes the following to the character a little bit more smooth. So this is responsible for that. And at the end we just update the position of the camera. So let's save this and now go to the main scene, select our camera, add a component, camera behavior. And now we can see a new section here with the camera behavior script. And as I told you before, we have the public variable for the entity to follow, and it's displayed here on the property grid. So now we just select the ghost center, which is the entity we want to follow. Okay, and that's it. Let's save this and run the game. And now the camera follows our character around, and you can see there's a smooth following and stopping as the character goes around. And now it's time to add the animations for our character, so we can see its legs move and have some movement going up, going down, which was the frames that we added to our sprite sheet before. So let's do that next. Add the code for the animations now. So we're going to go to Visual Studio, and I'm going to add the code. So first of all, I'm adding these fields here. These are the accumulated time that we will use to make sure that our animations run smoothly, start and stop correctly. Also the frame duration, this will control the speed of the animation, if it runs fast or slow. And the sprite sheet that we are going to reference to use and start our animations, loop through our animation. So next, in the start method, we add this code that initializes the sprite sheet and sets the current frame to frame 0. So when the game starts, the character is always facing in front. So it's the idle position that we defined when we created the frames on the sprite sheet. Next, in the handle movement, we are setting here a variable that sets the animation started to false always. So this way, always starting from clean slate. And then we are heading here private method that's going to be responsible for looping through the animations that define certain movements. For example, here when we press W, which is up, is going to loop through these start frame and end frame that shows the up animation. It also takes the delta time to make the proper calculations. And we are setting the animation started to true here. So we do the same for the other directions, and we check if the animation is not started, then the accumulated time is going to be 0. Next, we add the start animation method here, and this is the logic that ensures that the animations run smoothly, and also they always start from the first frame of the frame set loop. So let's save this and let's run the game. So now our character displays some movements and it has the proper animation, so going up, going down. When you press, it always resets and starts in the proper loop animation. And I know these are not the best animations, so sorry. I'm not a really good artist, so it serves the purpose for demonstration here. So looking at our game again, and let's run the game. If we go off the background, then we are off in the void, and that's not what we want. We could add more backgrounds and make the level much bigger and like a exploration level, but for this demonstration, I'll just create some walls and put the walls around so the player collides with them and doesn't go off to the to the matrix. Okay, so it will keep him inside. So let's do that next. Create the world environment. We're going first thing we are going to move a little closer here. And we are going to be adding some walls. So first thing we are going to create in the main scene, we are going to create a folder, and we can call this the world folder. This will contain all the elements on the world, like walls, other things that we want to add for our environment, for our game world environment. So inside here we will create an empty entity as always, and we can call this wall, and it should be around here. So press and drag it around. We already created the empty entity, but now we need to add the assets that will be referenced by that entity and that will be visible for us as walls. So let's do that now. We go to the assets and we add an asset. This is going to be a sprite, and we're going to select our world elements, and we double click the elements, and now we are going to do the same that we did before with the Ghost Hunter sprite sheet. So now that we have our spreadsheet with all the world elements, we can start using it. So let's create the wall. So what do we need now is going to be spreadsheet and the entity that we have already created. So we are going to add a component to this wall entity, and it's going to have right this, and now we are going to select reference the spreadsheet and the default frame. Let's use big wall 5, number 5. Let's use this big wall. Go back to the main scene, our wall, and the default frame is going to be number 5. We are going to change positioning here, and this has to be in front of the background. At the moment it's not visible, so we want it to becomes visible. And now we can start to scale and drag it around. But before we continue, for collisions, we have to do one thing. We have to add a static collider to this entity, so it will have a box around it, and all other things that contact with that box will count as a collision. So let's do that next. So we're going to add a component, physics, and we are going to add a static collider. So the static collider has some properties here that we can change. We're going to leave this as a default filter in the collision group. Let's continue. We can leave this as it is, and we will add a collider shape. For the collider shape, we will add a box. And at the moment, you can't see what has been added, but if you go up, select this grid and gizmo options here, and you can turn on physics, and you'll see right away that a box appears. And now we need to do a couple more things. So this box will need to be will need to cover all of the wall, so it needs to be wider, and also it needs to be 2D. Let's change the size. First of all, the axis it needs to be smaller, so maybe 0.8. Actually, okay, because we rotate it, so this needs to be wider. And the y-axis be a little bit smaller, maybe. I think that's okay. And that's it for our collider. So now any other shape that has a collision box around it will collide with this box, but not quite yet. We still need to make some adjustments for this to work properly. But anyways, let's continue. So I'll surround our background with these. So if I select the wall and Control D to duplicate, okay, so because the way we are looking at this, sometimes the walls may disappear, but they are there. Let's check out, let's run the game just to make sure. And as you can see, our player is not colliding with the walls, and that's okay. We'll make the adjustments to make this work. So I'll continue to add the walls, and then we'll continue from there. Let's also add some rocks to the level. And that's it. So let's add a couple of those around. Okay, so next we are going to be adding the rigid body to our character so he can collide with all these walls and rocks that we've been laying around. Before we add our code for the collisions, we first need to add a rigid body to our main character here, the Ghost Hunter. So we select the Ghost Hunter, we go to the properties grid, and we add a component and physics, and we are going to add a rigid body for our character. Next, we will need to select the eSkinematic, and what this will do is that for this rigid body there will be no mass and no gravity, and all will be managed by code. So we need this because the way that we made our game, if we did not add this, it will fall forever because it has gravity. So we don't have a ground, so it will fall forever. So in this case, we are going to select the eSkinematic. Next, we are going to add a collider shape, so the box, and you can see that for eSkinematic is a blue box. It's different from the static colliders that we saw before, and we are going to set this 2D. We're going to reshape our box, and that seems okay, and that's it. So now we can start with our codes. Save this and let's carry on. So next thing we are going to do is we are going to be adding our collision code, and for that we are going to use Visual Studio Community. So let's pull up our Visual Studio. We're going to add this code to the Ghost Hunter controls, and let's add the code now. So first things, I'm going to add these 3 fields here: the direction the character is facing, the rigid body component, that was the rigid body we added, we're going to retrieve that, and the last OK position. So when the character collides with a wall or a rock, we'll need to pull the character a little bit back from the direction he's facing, so it doesn't get stuck in that collision. So next, we are initializing our physics variable with the rigid component, and also we are setting our direction as a default to be direction down. Next, we are going to create a method called handle collisions, and the method will handle the collisions there. So let's add the code. And this is the code for the collisions. And before, we also need to add the directions. We need, on our handle movement, we need to update the direction that the character is facing. So, and every time we change direction, it will be updated. Then in our handle collision method, it will check if there is collision, and it will know the direction it's facing in and pull the character a little bit back so it doesn't get stuck on that collision. So let's test this code. So as you can see, when we bump into a wall or a rock, we immediately, if we force it, we get pulled back. It doesn't go in these elements in our world. So this is it. Let's move to the next phase. Next, we are going to create our spawn points and ghost enemies. So let's do it. So we're going to be needing our assets. So we're going to be needing, okay, first we need to click on assets, on the assets folder. Next, we'll be adding a sprite sheet, and we will be selecting our enemy sprite sheet here. And now you probably already know what's going to happen. We are going to create our ghost frame and duplicate this, select the spawn point, and let's call this ghost, and we have our assets ready. Save this, and now we are ready to create our first spawn point and spawn some ghosts. Let's do that. So we are going to be needing a script for creating our ghosts and our spawn point. Close this, and let's click on the code folder, add script, going to be a sync script. Let's give it a name, spawn point. And let's open this with Visual Studio. So now we are going to add our spawn points, and we are going to be needing a couple of fields. As usual, we're going to be adding some rotation to the spawn point, and also we are going to need the accumulated time again. We are not going to need the start method here, so we can delete this. We're only going to need the update method here. I'm going to add the code, so delta time, and we need the delta time to make the rotation work properly, and this is it. So next, this is affecting the transform rotation property of our entity, which will be a spawn point. And now we are going to add the logic to spawn ghosts every 5 seconds. Before we spawn some ghosts, let's just create an entity and see it rotate in our game world. So going back here to our main scene, we are going to create an empty entity that we are going to call spawn point. Let's make it spawn point 1. And we select it and we add a component and we add our script, spawn point script. Selecting our spawn point, we also need to put it in front of the screen, and we'll add also the sprite component, and we'll reference our spawn point image, which is number 1 frame. So now if we run our game, we should see the rotating spawn point appear. So we have our first spawn point. Let's position it somewhere a little bit further from the player. And now we'll add our ghosts to the spawn point so it can spawn ghosts every 5 seconds. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Okay, so now we will need to create our spawn ghost method here to spawn ghosts every 5 seconds. At the moment it was not doing anything, so let's create this private method with the help of IntelliSense, and let's start. So first thing, we need to get our character reference, so that will be our ghost hunter reference. And for that, let's create a variable, and we can call it ghost hunter, and this will be equal the entity dot scene. So going to the scene dot entities, and then first or default, where the entity has a name equal to ghost hunter. Oops. So that. And this will get our ghost hunter entity that we can then use to get the position, because we are going to make the ghost enemies follow our ghost hunter around. So if the ghost hunter is null, then we want to return right away. This means that if the ghost hunter is null, it means that probably a ghost already got him, so he's dead. And we are going to dynamically create our ghosts. So this is going to be a ghost, and it's going to be equal to a new entity, and we are going to give name the ghost, and we'll also need to get the sprite component for the ghost. In this case, we are using the method get or create. And here we need the name of the sprite sheet, which contains the ghost and the spawn point. So let's give it a name. Save this and go back to the studio. The frame I think is 0. Yeah, the ghost is 0. Go back. We will also dynamically be creating a rigid body for this ghost, for all the ghosts created this way. And it's also going to be a kinematic rigid type. So we are adding a box collider shape here, which is 2D, and the size we are defining here, keeping always the z-axis to 1 so it can be in front of the background. And also we are giving it a collision group of custom filter 2, so this will be different from the main character. This line of code will mean that the ghosts will be created at the position of the spawn point, so right in the middle of the spawn point. And this last line of code will add the ghost to the scene. So now let's test the game. Let's go up to our spawn point, and you can see that the ghost appeared, but there is a problem because the ghost is not following our character around. So we will need to add that functionality to our ghost. And for that, we need to create another script, and we'll reference it directly, dynamically from the code. So let's do that next. So we need to create a script that we haven't created yet. So we'll just reference the component and create the script next. So we can call it ghost movement. So let's create the ghost movement script now. Go back to our Stride Game Studio and I'm going to go to code. Okay, so it's telling us that we have an error because it's the ghost movement script that we have not created yet. It's trying to reference it, but it doesn't exist. That's no problem, we'll create it right away. So we are going to create a sync script and give it the name that we give it before. And if we check the error here, should be gone. Yes. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and we have the ghost movement here. And again, let's remove the start method because we are not going to use it, and we're just going to reference our ghost hunter entity. So private entity enter, and here we are going to retrieve that entity. So we are getting our ghost hunter entity. Again, if it's null and then we go out, return nothing. So we leave the update method without returning anything. And let's continue. So we want to move the ghost very slowly to the position that our ghost hunter is. So I'm going to paste the code here. So again, we get the delta time to make the calculation and the position. So what happens here is that the ghost will move very slowly in the position of the ghost hunter. Let's see if this works. And you can see every 5 seconds there's a ghost spawning. Of course, if they collide, then nothing happens. They just get attached to our player, so that's not what we want. So, but we already have our ghosts haunting the place, so let's move on to the next phase. Next, we are ready to add our shooting action to our ghost hunter. So for that, we are going to need to create a new sync script. So let's do that. We are going to call our script Ghost Hunter Shooting Action. And we can go to Visual Studio to edit this script. I'm going to add all the code now and explain at the end. So now that we've entered our code, let's have a look. So first we have our isShooting variable here. This is used in the logic in the update method to make sure that we only shoot one ball at a time, one projectile. Next, we have our public sprite sheet that will accept the sprite sheet with the ball, and we will reference the ball from there. So we need yet to put our sprite sheet or to reference our script, but we'll do that next. Um, Next, the start method, I didn't remove it because we are going to need it later for adding some sounds when we shoot. Next, we have the update method. So we get the direction the ghost hunter is facing, and that will be the direction that the projectile will be initialized from. Next, we have the logic here that is responsible for shooting and for passing in the direction that the projectile is being shot from. And we create here a private method that gives in the direction. So the ball entity is created inside this method, and it's created as normal as an entity. And also we attach the sprite sheet with the frame of that shows the ball. And next we'll add it a rigid body component. So as before, we had a kinematic rigid body and a collider shape for this entity, for the entities that will be created this way. And also we give it a different collision group, which will be used later to determine which to use when we want to make a different behavior based on the collision that is happening. Next, we give a position for this ball entity and we add it to the scene. Now we are going to add the script as a reference to our ghost hunter. So let's open the Stride Game Studio, click on our ghost hunter, and on the right side on the property grid we add a component, we add a script, and we are going to add the ghost hunter shooting method to the property grid. And we now see we have it added here. So now we need to reference the sprite sheet that contains our ball, that is the projectile. So we need to go to our assets and drag and drop to our newly added script component, and that's it. But if we test our game now, you will notice that at this point the ball does not follow through. It stays put at the same location as the player, because we need to add behavior to this ball entity. And also there is where we will add what happens when the ball enters in the collision with one of the ghosts. So let's add those behaviors now. Still in our ghost hunter shooting action script, we are going to add 2 lines of code just below our rigid body ending code line here, and we are going to add the behavior, which is what happens to the ball when shooting the ball is called. So we are going to reference another script. This script is going to be an async script. We're just going to call it ball behavior, and we are passing in also the direction. So let's create this script now. Let's go back to our Stride Game Studio and let's click on the code folder, add another script, and this time we are going to add an async script, and we should call it the name that we gave for the reference in our Ghost Hunter action script. And let's go back to Visual Studio, and now we can see that the ball behavior is no longer giving an error. So we can go to our ball behavior script and start entering some code here. I'm going to enter the code and explain at the end. So at this point, we now can shoot the projectile and it follows through. But nothing happens when the ball projectile hits one of the ghosts. Let's see this in action now. I'm going to run the game. And as you can see, nothing happens. So let's set the behavior to kill the ghosts when the balls enter in contact with them. This will be done with the check collision method that we've created previously. And this method is going to implement some async logic, so that is why we needed to create an async script. So let's start to enter our code now. So let's review this code. So first we create a variable for the direction, and we create a variable that defines the speed in which the projectile travels. Next we add a task which is our check collision, and next in our loop while the game is running we define the starting position for the projectile, and we also give it a speed and direction for it to follow through. The check collision method here, it first gets the rigid body component so the collision can be calculated. This is done here in this logic here, where we check which collider, which entity is our ball colliding with, and next, if this entity has a component called isDestructable component, then we will remove it. So we need to give this, first we need to create this component here, the isDestructable, and add it to our ghosts. Before we test our game, let's add the isDestructable component script. For the isDestructable component, we are going in Visual Studio, create C# class, and we're just going to right click on the RPG game root folder, and we're going to select add new item, or we can just go here to class, and we're going to give the name that we gave it before. This class needs to be public. And it needs to inherit from entity component. And now let's add the code to delete or remove the entity whenever this is called. This class is only going to contain one method. It's going to be the destroy method, and basically it just removes the entity from the scene and disposes the entity object. So we save this and we go back to call behavior class async script that we created before. We can now see that we no longer have the error here, and the destructable component is being referenced correctly. So there is one thing we need to do, and we need to go back to our game Stride Studio. We will click on our Ghost Hunter entity, go to the entity property grid, and in the rigidbody properties here, we go to collides with and we change the values, and here we need to remove the custom filter 1, because as you remember, the ball that comes out of the player of the Ghost Hunter, it should not collide with the player, otherwise you will see strange behavior. So we need to remove this collision between the ball and the player. So let's test our game at this point. So as you can see now, we already have the collisions and the ball doesn't go through the ghost. So now we can make the changes to destroy the ghosts whenever the collisions happen. And of course we need to add this destructible component that we just created to our ghost. So we go back to our spawn point, and right below here where we are adding our ghost movement sync script, we are going to add our is destructible component. So now we have our is destructible component added to our ghosts that are created from our spawn point. We should now be able to see the ball destroying the ghost when there is a collision. So let's test out our game and see this in action. And now our ghost hunter is able to destroy the ghosts. But if the ghosts collide with our ghost hunter, he still doesn't get deleted or removed, and the game doesn't end. So next we are going to add what happens if there is a collision between the ghost and our ghost hunter. So let's do that next. So still in the spawn point where our ghosts are created, we're going to add the behavior of what happens when the ghost collides with our ghost hunter. And for that we are going to add another line of code or another component that is going to be an async script again. This script is going to be responsible for the behavior of what happens when the ghost collides with our ghost hunter. So let's do that next. And we are going to call this async script ghost collides with ghost hunter behavior, and we are going to create this the async script next. So let's go back to our Stride Game Studio, and we are going to add the async script. We are going to give it the name that we give in our reference. And now we can go back to Visual Studio and start and open this async script that we just created. And now we can start entering our code. We're just going to add this private method that checks the collision with the ghost. And if there's a collision, then we are going to delete the ghost hunter from the scene and the game is over. But let's look at this method that we've created. So first of all, as before, we get the rigid component, also we get the collider, and we also check which entity are we colliding with, is the ghost colliding with, and if the ghost is collided with the entity called ghost hunter, then the ghost hunter is gone from the scene and is closed. So let's check if this is all working. And as you can see, it's working. So the player is gone, our ghost hunter is gone, and the ghosts are no longer spawning and the ghost freezes. So this is done. The last thing that we need to do is add some sounds to our shooting and also to the ghosts when they die. So let's do that and finish. First thing that we need to do is go back to our Stride Game Studio, and we are going to add our sounds. So we go to the click on the assets folder, add asset, go to media, sound effects, and we are going to go to the resources, sounds, and should be able to import two sounds. And the name is of the sounds are ghost dice sound and the magic ball sound. So if we click on the sound, and if we click here on the asset preview here, and we click play, so this is the ghost dying, very annoying sound, I can admit that, and the ball shooting. Okay, so let's add this in our code. So we need to go to the scripts. We better do this in Visual Studio, sorry. So going back to Visual Studio, and we go to our ghost hunter shooting action, and we are going to go up. I'm going to add the code and explain at the end. So we are creating a sound instant variable, and then we are initializing this variable by loading the content for that sound. So this is the way you load contents dynamically in the code. So shoot ball instance is going to create an instance that we can use, and if we go down, so when you shoot the ball, the last thing that is ran is the shoot ball instance dot play that plays the sound. So let's test this out. and as you can see we are getting an error. So what we need to do is go back to our Stride Game Studio and click on the assets, and we need to, on both of the sounds, we need to include inbuilt as root asset, sorry. So click there, and for the other one, and let's run the game again. Go back to Visual Studio, run the game. And we are still getting the error here, so let's see what's going on. And we might need to build this in order to work. Let's build our project and let's run it from here. Okay, it's running, and there you go. You press the space bar and shoot. It now works. And now we need to add the sound for the ghosts dying. So let's do that next. And for the sound of the ghosts dying, we are going to go with to the script that we created. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and it's going to be the ghost collides with the ghost hunter behavior. And here is where we're going to add this sound. So the same, pretty much the same way that we did as for the ball shooting scenario. So let's add that code. To add the ghost dying sound, we are going to go to the ball behavior script that we created before, and this is where we are going to add the sound is when the collision between the ball and the ghost happens, and if the ghost is affected, the ghost is destroyed, then we play the sound here. So let's add that code now. So pretty much as we have done before, we are going to add the sound instance variable, and then we are going to initialize it with the content of the sound that we load, and this is going to create our instance here of the ghost style sound, and then we are going to play this sound every time that a ghost is destroyed from the scene. So let's test this now. To show you just a couple more things before we wrap up this tutorial. Back in our game Stride Studio, if we open in the main scene here, let's say you want to create more spawn points that at the moment is not appearing here. Okay, let's say you want to create a couple more spawn points around. You just click the spawn point, and you can press the Ctrl D to duplicate, and you can move it around, and you've created a second spawn point. Don't forget to change the name here. So you go name, and we can name this spawn point number 2, and And if you want to create another one, you can do the same again. So Control D, and you put this one down here, for example, and change name to 1.3, for example. And don't forget to check. So you can see on the property grid here that everything is copied the same, so you still have the same behavior with the grids being copied and the sprites and everything. And just to be sure that everything is positioned correctly, so don't forget in the Z axis it needs always be number 1, so it's in front of the background. So check if everything is okay, and let's test our game now. You can see already you have, I just died there, so let's start it again. But as you can see there, the enemies are spawning and all works the same. Let's see if the other one down here, it's spawned well. Yep, there he is. 2 of them already. Let's see if the other ones are okay. So there's a bunch of ghosts already going around, and I'm probably, oh, there you go. So kind of a ninja. Okay, and I lost, and that's it. So you can do more things with this game. So you can add, make the level bigger. You can add walls, make like a maze type of thing. You can play around with collisions. You can create other elements in the game world. So I hope this serves as a template for your games, and that you've learned something with this. I think it's easy to get started if you know a little bit of C#. If not, I recommend for you to learn some C#. And also, please, again, check all the tutorials in the Stride3D webpage. They have lots of tutorials. Make sure to go through the manual and learn all the concepts that the engine applies, and the code examples that it has. And I'm sure you'll come up with wonderful games much better than this one. I'm absolutely 100% sure than that. So thank you for watching, and please do subscribe and help me out if you want to see more content like this. I do want to continue to make more content using this game engine, so if you like it, please comment below and do subscribe. Thank you very much. See you next time.